Ever feel like, those moments where you're like, where can I find some, like, truly different leadership advice?
Hmm.
We're about to get kind of unconventional today. We're diving into, wait for it, about biblical figures.
Okay.
But before you think this is, like, a Sunday school lesson, hold on. We're talking practical leadership gold, stuff you can use today. We're digging into this article by Glenn Rager, 12 Most Inspiring Leadership Lessons from Bible Characters. Super interesting stuff. It's not about, preaching. It's about seeing these figures as, like, leadership archetypes.
Right.
Their stories, their struggles, even thousands of years ago, they still kind of resonate today.
Yeah.
So are you ready to unearth some, like, surprisingly relevant leadership advice?
I'm intrigued. Yeah. It's amazing how these stories, they last,
They do. Okay, so instead of going through all 12 figures, we picked a few whose stories are, like, super relevant to what leaders deal with today. First up, Noah. Ark, the flood, the whole two of every animal thing.
Yeah.
But, like, think about it. What can a guy who built a giant boat, basically because of a message from,
Right.
what can he teach us about leadership? It's not exactly in the Harvard Business Review.
That's what makes it so interesting. The article talks about Noah's commitment, his unwavering commitment, even when everyone thought he was, well, totally nuts.
Totally.
Imagine that pressure, standing alone, everyone's doubting you, making fun of you, and you're building this monumental thing.
Right. Like, it makes you think about those moments we all have when we start to doubt our own vision. How do you know when to, like, stand strong like Noah versus,
Yeah.
adapt, change course, especially when everything's on the line?
Yeah. That is the question for a leader, isn't it? It's not about being blind, just going on faith or being stubborn. It's about looking at your convictions really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Noah's story, it makes us think, okay, what do we really believe in and why? How we thought it through? Are we paying attention, really understanding what's going on around us? And are we willing to change if we need to?
So it's less about, like, literally building arcs, right? It's more about building that strong inner belief, the kind that can handle anything.
Exactly. And that means it's like a balance you have to really believe, but you also have to be humble enough to say, okay, maybe I need to adjust something here.
It's a tough thing to do. And speaking of tough situations, let's move from arcs to ancient Egypt. Talk about a masterclass in resilience. Joseph. This is a guy who was sold into slavery by his brothers, no less, falsely accused, thrown in prison. Talk about a rough go.
Wow.
But then he rises to the top, becomes one of the most powerful people in Egypt, and what does he do? He uses that power to help people, including, get this, the brothers who betray him in the first place.
Wow. That's something else.
What's incredible about Joseph isn't just that he, like, succeeds in the end. It's how he turns all that bad stuff, all that pain, into, like, a strength.
It's true. Most people, they'd be so bitter, so full of resentment, but not him.
It's like he's, like, living proof that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But how do you actually do that? How do you keep going when everything seems so unfair, so stacked against you?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And Joseph's story gives us some hints. He teaches us about perspective. Not getting bogged down in what's unfair, but seeing the bigger picture.
He's like, okay, I can't control that, but I can control this. I can control how I act, what I choose to believe. That takes serious guts.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like we can't always pick what happens to us, but we can decide how we react. That's like the heart of resilience right there.
So how do we, like, actually build that Joseph-level resilience? It's easy to say, be positive, but what about when things really, truly suck? What then?
It's like you got to work those muscles, those mental and emotional muscles, before you need them.
Train for the challenge, basically.
Exactly. Like cultivate a growth mindset. Find your people, your support system, and be kind to yourself. Self-compassion is huge.
That's so true. Okay, from the resilience of Joseph, we're shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about finding your voice, even when it feels impossible. Moses.
Oh, yeah, Moses.
Parting the Red Sea, leading your people out of slavery. That's like leadership 101.
Legendary.
But here's the thing. Moses, he almost didn't do it. He was full of self-doubt.
Really?
Yeah. He was like, God, are you sure about this? Me? Really? I think we've all felt like that, right? When we're facing something huge, something scary.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Imposter syndrome, it's a thing. Even the greats feel it. It's what you do with that doubt that matters.
So true. How do we get past that voice in our heads that says, you can't do this? Especially when it feels as impossible as, like, confronting the Pharaoh.
Well, Moses' story shows us that leadership, it's often about becoming, stepping outside that comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being okay with the unknown, because that's where you grow.
It's turning that "I can't" into "how can I?"
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe asking for help along the way.
Because we don't have to do it alone.
Exactly. Sometimes the biggest step a leader takes is that first one, out of their comfort zone.
And speaking of stepping out of one's comfort zone, David. Slingshot, giant, the ultimate underdog story.
Classic.
But it's more than just a great story, right? It's about challenging what we think is possible.
Totally. Everyone else saw Goliath and was terrified. David saw an opportunity.
He didn't let what everyone else believed limit him.
He redefined winning.
For sure. And sometimes those limiting beliefs, they're the biggest giants we face, you know?
100%. And real innovation, true leadership, it often comes from saying, what if we challenge that? Those old ways of doing things, those assumptions, we just accept without thinking.
So how do we tap into that David versus Goliath energy? How do we even find those giants to fight, whether it's like outdated rules or our own fear of failure?
Start by being curious. Question everything. Ask what if all the time. Be willing to see things differently, even if it feels risky, even if it's unconventional.
Embrace the underdog spirit.
Yes. And believe in yourself. Trust your gut, especially when other people doubt you.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the toughest battles we fight are the ones inside our own heads. Now, we've talked about courage, resilience, but real leadership also means inspiring others, not by bossing them around, but by who you are. And for that, we turn to Joshua, a leader who knew that true power wasn't about wielding authority, but about helping others find their own way. So Joshua, he leads the Israelites to the promised land, right? Big moment.
Huge.
But here's the thing. He doesn't just tell everyone, okay, this is what we're doing now. It's not like that.
Interesting. What does he do?
He gives them a choice. He's like, look, you can follow the crowd or you can make your own path. You can stay true to what you believe, even when it's hard.
Powerful stuff.
And here's the key. And he doesn't just talk about it. He lives it.
Leading by example. It's so important, yet so rare sometimes.
Exactly. That's what makes Joshua so cool. He's like the real deal. He's not demanding blind obedience, you know?
It's about authenticity, isn't it?
Totally. It's like he's saying, this is what I believe. This is the path I'm choosing. Now, what about you?
And that kind of vulnerability, that willingness to really put yourself out there, I think it gives other people permission to do the same.
Totally. Think about the leaders you've really admired, the ones who inspire you. I bet they were the ones who walked the walk, not just talked the talk.
100%. It's not about being perfect either. It's about being genuine. It's about doing what you say you're going to do, even when no one's looking. That's how you build trust.
It makes you wonder, you know, in a world where everyone's trying to look perfect, how do we lead with that kind of realness, that authenticity?
It starts with knowing yourself, right?
Right.
What are your non-negotiables? What do you stand for, even when it's tough? And are you living that? Or just talking about it?
Closing that gap between who we say we are and who we actually are.
Exactly. And that means being vulnerable sometimes.
Mm.
Admitting when we screw up. And always trying to be better, to
Real
live up
true.
to those values.
It's about being the best version of ourselves. Not for anyone else, but because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so we've got conviction, resilience, leading by example. But what about when those beliefs are really put to the test? For that, we go to Daniel. This is a guy who had to make an impossible choice. Follow an unjust law or stay true to his faith, even if it meant, you know.
Wow. Talk about high stakes.
No kidding. Daniel's story is all about moral courage. He was literally thrown into a den of lions just for praying.
That's intense.
Right. He could have easily just given in, compromised what he believed to save himself, but he didn't. He chose integrity.
That takes guts. Serious guts. To stand alone like that, knowing what could happen.
That makes you ask yourself, what do I really believe in? And am I willing to fight for it, even if it costs me something?
From unwavering integrity, let's shift gears a bit, to a leader known for being, well, a little more in your face. John the Baptist.
Yeah.
This guy, he was not afraid to make waves.
Oh, yeah, John the Baptist. He didn't mince words.
Not at all. He's a good reminder that sometimes being a leader means being honest, even when it's uncomfortable.
Truth to power. Calling out hypocrisy, even when it's risky. That's John.
But it's about finding that balance, right? Between being real and being, like, respectful. For sure. It's not about being mean or disrespectful. It's about having those tough conversations, challenging the status quo, but doing it with integrity and really wanting to make things better.
So how do we channel our inner John the Baptist without, you know, growing a beard and living in the desert?
Find your voice.
Yeah.
Speak your truth clearly and confidently. And make sure your actions match your words. It's about being a force for good, even in small ways, every day.
Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply speak up. So, as we wrap up our little journey through these timeless leadership lessons, we got to talk about the one figure whose influence is undeniable, no matter what your beliefs are.
Jesus.
Exactly. Now, Jesus's leadership, it was revolutionary. He was all about serving others, being humble, putting others first. He challenged the whole idea of power.
Servant leadership is such a powerful concept.
It really is. And it makes you realize every interaction we have, it's a chance to lead with kindness, with compassion.
Absolutely. His teachings on forgiveness, on love, they offer a whole new perspective on leadership, one where it's not about controlling others, it's about empathy, it's about uplifting everyone.
So as we close out this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Real leadership, it's not about titles or positions or bossing people around. It's about who you are.
It's about character, integrity, and dedicating yourself to something bigger than yourself.
It's about realizing that the challenges we face as leaders, they're not new. The need for courage, for resilience, for compassion, these are timeless.
And these biblical figures, they're not giving us all the answers, but they're giving us something to think about. A way to look at our own leadership journeys and find inspiration in unexpected places.
They remind us that leadership, it's a journey, not a destination. And sometimes the most important lessons, we learn those not when we're on top, but when we're facing our fears or doubts, and when we have to stand up for what we believe in. Something to think about. And hey, maybe a topic for a whole other deep dive sometime. Thanks for joining us.